Okay, so I am going to do this soldering project. This is the 555 timer. I got the piece of paper right here with the schematic, and I've got the components laying around my table. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the schematic and kind of get a game plan of how I'm going to do this. So looking at it, I see the R2 and the R1 both go to 7. The R1 goes to 8, and the R2 goes to 6. So I can put those three, or those two resistors by those 3 pins, and that should give me a nice fit. I can see R5's not being used, or the 5 pin's not being used, so I can run the capacitor off of 6, or I can go to 2. And so that works. 3 is going to be my troublesome, so I probably don't want to put the capacitor near 2, because then I'll have to deal with 3. Alright, so I'm going to start with my board. Let's see. I like how it's positioned. Just for record, I am using my Weller on my bench with a medium tip. I'm doing this not because it provides any kind of advantage compared to a standard soldering, just it's what I have at what I have right now. So I'm going to turn it over, and let's get some heat on this. All right. And so let's get some heat. Come on. All right, so I'm going to start by soldering the chip into place. And so what I want to do is I want to just get one tacked into place. So I'm just applying some heat. Apply some heat to the middle pin, make it a little bit easier. The wire I'm using, or the solder I'm using, is 0.31 or 0.031. Just put a little stab on there. I want to put a little more. And that looks good. Now I'm just going to do the rest of them. So I'm just doing the other side just to help tie it down. You'll notice I'm putting the heat on the back side so it doesn't run too far. Sure. On. This is the advantage of using 31,000 solder versus 50,000. I have a lot more control in the amount of solder I'm putting in. That's a little too much. Turn it around. Make sure I get a little tension. There's that. There's that. Now, I am probably running a little hotter than what a standard stick, but that's just making me go faster. And so if we look at this, I don't see any balls, and it looks to be fairly complete, and it's nice and flush. Oops. Alright, now I'm going to take my numbering as my top. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put this chip in, this piece in. So I'm going to put it right there, and I'm just going to solder this in. Come on, get some heat. So part of the problem of using a smaller tip is that it's much more sensitive to temperature change. So when I'm using a wet sponge to clean the tip off, it will cool down much faster and I have to wait for it to heat up. The other thing is that because this is a very expensive tip, I have to do a lot of extra steps to make sure that I get the most mileage out of it. Now let's see, get some heat. But the advantage is I'm a lot more controlled in the heat that I'm putting in. There's that. All right, let's take a look at this one. A little excessive on the row 1. Yeah, and it's not all the way in. So in this situation, I've gotten it a little too high on the board. You can see that there's a nice gap. In order to fix that, I'm just going to apply some downward pressure on the table. I'm going to come back in here with the soldering iron and heat that solder up and apply some pressure. I'm going to do the other side, get a little level. And now you can see it has a really good, well, it's a little, let's get a little bit more. There we go. So you can see there, it's a lot more flush. All right, so basically what I've done is I've identified row 1 and 2 as my power pins. All right, so first thing I'm going to do, what I'm going to do now, make sure I'm in screen, is I want to identify, I want to do those two resistors, R1 and R2. Since I'm going to make number 1 the top of my board, that means pins 5, 6, 7, and 8 are 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, excellent. So 6, 7, and 8 are where I'm going to solder. Now, there's two ideas on how you do soldering. You can either put your components in really close and build out, or you can put components out and build in. In this particular situation, I am going to build if I put them in close like this, then they're right up against the chip. If I put them out here, I have more room to work. Now looking at the schematic, 7 has nothing going to it outside of these two, so there's no advantage for 7. 8 is power, so I'm going to be running a wire out of 8. So the farther out on the board you are, the easier it is to do soldering. So that might be a consideration, but it's not really that difficult. Not doing anything with 6, or 6 has got to go to 2. Now when I do my internal jumps, I like to keep it as close as possible. I'm going to take a look at the bottom. All right, I know what I'm doing. So I'm going to put these in the middle. I'm going to put this right here. And so you can see that's, I just did a radial stand, and I'm putting the wire, portion in 7 for a very particular reason. And I'll get to that in a sec. And R1 is 7 to 8, the 6.8, R2 is 6 to 7. So I'm going to do a radial here, and I'm going to put this one farther out, like that. So I set mine like this for a couple reasons. One, it gives a little bit more protection on this inner wire from the sides. If I wanted to, which is a big no-no, I probably could force. Yes. So I could actually force those two together. You can see they're on top of each other. Generally, you don't do this. It's just bad form. So I'm going to get it in the hole. There we go. I'm just going to do it this way. Now, this is where a support beam of some sort might come in handy. So I've got these wires that need to be soldered. And so I'm going to turn it over top. All right. So we're going to get the first solder joint in. The first one I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to do the inner one first. I'm going to take this guy out. And so 910 is 7, 8. It's 8. That's 7. I'm going to do that right there. So you can see this is wanting to move around. Now, somebody might be tempted to go, oh, I'll just bend this wire. And that can work if you bend it back. You really don't want to do this because, one, you can see already it's starting to want to move around a little bit. The other is that now you have this wire bent sideways. But you can use this for leverage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to lever it down so that it stays in place. Apply my heat. You can see I'm not even using that wire anymore. So like that. Apply a little heat, let go, let it solidify. Now it's on. I'm just going to kind of give it a little push so that it's nice and straight. I'm going to bend this wire back up a little bit. And you can see there's a little bit of a bend back end. So I'm going to bend this wire straight. Take some needle nose. Bend these straight. Yeah, a little bit of a kink there, but it's straight enough. Now I'm going to solder that second side. Come in from this side. Put a little heat. Time to heat up. And that one is good. So bend it around this way. You can see pretty solid. I'll take my flush cutters, a little bit high. Where did that little wire chased off there a minute? I'm going to hold on to that little wire for show you what I'm going to do with it in a second. And there you go. I'm cut just above the solder joint, nice and flush. Now the 810, I'm going to put it in these holes. You can see it's in the side holes beside it. So let's see. Oh yeah, that's going to work just lovely. Put a little heat on it from this angle. And get a little heat. Go. Let's see. Yeah, that looks good. So I'm just trying to position it just a little bit to make it look good. I want it nice and straight and uniform looking. And once it's there, I'm going to come back in. Now I'm going to come in from this side to apply the heat, because what I want to do is I kind of want to join these two solder puddles. And there we go. Wires are straight, and I'm just going to come in here and go get myself a nice elevation. Alright, so those two resistors. Now, if you're wondering why I'm looking to the left here, it's because I got my computer, so I'm trying to make sure that I stay in the zone area. This isn't a very big area to work out of, but it doesn't help to work outside of it, because you wouldn't be able to see the video. Alright, now looking at my next thing. I've got that capacitor. That capacitor is going to 6. Now, this is where it gets to be fun. 6 is that guy right there. So if I stick it in like this, I'm hitting up against that resistor. If I stick in right here, I'm up against there. So if I come here to 2, I got a lot of open space. But then I'm going to have the problem with 3. So, well, I didn't think that through now, did I? That's where I want to be. Alright, so I've done goofed. And I cut to boot. Where is it? Suction pump. And a little bit more heat. And then I'm going to sometimes you have to give it a little bit of a encouragement. Probably let's do this one. I think that's the one that's sticking it. Alright, let's see. Is it loose now? So it looks loose now. And I just broke it. Alright, sometimes that happens. Be right back. So yeah, that happens from time to time. Sometimes you do what you think you're going to do and it just breaks. So, got my replacement, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this capacitor in. I know the capacitor has to go from 6 down, and so that's where I want that capacitor, is in that hole right beside there. And so that's where I'm going to put it. And that's the importance of actually game planning out what you plan to do. Yeah, and this is also when having helping hands works out really well too. Alright, are you going to sit? I think you're going to sit. And you can't see what I'm doing. Alright. So what I'm doing is I'm going to solder this pin, because this pin is a lot more stable than trying to solder. Maybe this pin will solder. Get that out of there. There we go. I'm going to come in like this. Ooh, don't turn. There we go. Yeah, so sometimes that happens. And sometimes you break components. You don't want to do that to expensive components, but resistors aren't that expensive. Now, that resistor, sometimes you lose. There we go. So now what I want to do is I want to place this in the same spot, but I'm going to come down one hole. And so you'll see that's going to sit right in there beside it. Now that I'm looking at this, I would have preferred this to be reversed. And we'll see how that goes. Let's see, is it going to sit? Yes. So I'm just going to come in here, apply a little heat. Sometimes it's a matter of trying to figure out what's the best way to apply the heat. Oh yeah, there we go. Now, that direction worked really well. Come in from this direction. All right, there's that. One slight fix better later. Cut some things down. So that. And I'm just turning it so that the wires don't go flying all over the place. So you can see that, nice and smooth. I might have cut those a little too tight, but it's good. All right. So that's the C1, the R1, and the R2. Now, I am going to do the LED setup. Now I've got two resistors coming off of pin 3 going to two different LEDs. Pin 3, if you remember, this is pin 1 because this is I'm going this way. This is pin 1, so this is the row for pin 3. Now I'm just going to mock this up right quick. So if I take this guy, stick it right there. It's a little tight. And we're going to take this guy, do this. Okay. Let's do, so if we do that, and then bend this, not exactly. Put that one in like that. And then I get my other LED. We go here. That's not going to work. So the reason why this isn't going to work, there we go, is I need to still make these two jumpers right here. And so this lower jumper will work fine for what I've got there, but this one will not. But fortunately, I can just come over one row. And that will allow me to do my jumpers. Alright, so pull these out. And so I think I'm going to do the resistors first. So I'm having a little bit of a hard time with this resistor in particular trying to sit down. So I'm going to look at it. It looks like this side over here doesn't want to bend perfectly. So let's see if that's going to work this time. Oh, one row off. Oh yeah, that works great. So what I'm going to do now, just turn this guy around. And I turned it the exact. This to this, and in we go. Alright, so I want to solder these two joints in. So this is going to be the fun part. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and just heat these two up and get some solder into them. Alright, so here's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to grab my pliers and I'm going to grab a hold of that wire. While I'm doing that, I'm just going to pull up. Now, you want to be a little bit above. And once you've grabbed, you let go. Now we're going to turn it back over. And it is, so you'll see it's sitting on that. So we're going to do that again. That out of the way. Grab this one, apply some heat, and it pulled through, let go. Slid back through. One more time. There we go. You can see now it's on there tight. I'm just going to take this, give it a little downward push, and apply some solder. Alright. Now, I'm going to work backwards. Just going to put some heat in here. Get some solder, grab my pliers, pull it through, let the heat off while I'm still applying tension. And you can see it's perfectly on that board. Give it a little position adjustment. And now we're going to apply some heat to this one and get it soldered in. Come on, why aren't you heating up? There we go. Two nicely soldered in resistors. These wires flush. And there we go. Now up to this point we can do whatever. We are at a point we could call either one of these resistors resistor 3 or resistor 4. It really doesn't matter. Resistors don't care which direction the current flows. Diodes, LEDs in particular, do. So if we look, we need to make sure that we identify which one of these pins is going to be my positive and which one's going to be negative. And as such, we need to identify which one the cathode needs to go on and which one the anode needs to go on. So, I'm going to say this is my 12 volt. And this is the cathode. So this is my positive, negative. I want to run you right here. So I'm going to bend this a little bit. Oh, lovely. All right. So down that goes. All right. Negative terminal there. I like that. Now, let's see, I got a little bit of an elevation on that. That's fine. These are just not going to be able to sit perfectly on the board. So I'm just going to solder that in. Solder there. Solder there. And so there that is. Come in here, cut it down. Now this one. Now this one is going to be reverse of what I just did. I'm going to make sure I got that nice and square. So I'm going to put it in those two holes. Whoop. Let's see. Yeah, that leg got bent up a little bit. I don't want to do that. I want it nice and square. I want it reverse. I want it like that. Alright. Whoa, too much. So I'm spending a little bit of extra effort trying to get it square. Alright. I'm going to put a little support under. At this point, hopefully that will support. We'll see how bad that's going to work. Get some heat. Now I'm going to look at it. Yeah, that I think is going to work. All right. We'll do this. So I'm lightly just applying pressure. There we go. Cut it with the back end of the pinky. Get some heat in there, some solder, let it go. Nice. All right, so there's that. I'm going to cut these wires back. And there's that. All right, so there's that circuit. Now, I got a couple of wires I got to make, right? So we still got to hook everything together. We've just soldered components together. We haven't hooked anything together. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually bridge these two parts. And those wire cuttings I've collected, I'm going to use those. And so what I'm going to do, those are rounds. I'm going to bend myself some jumper points. I'm going to do it on this side just so it's visually noticeable. And so what I've done here is I just bent to 90 degrees on that straight piece of wire, right? And so I'm now going to put it in the board. I'm going to actually do it down here to do the fit up because it's a little easier. I'm going to put it in the hole that I want. So the hole that I want to put this in is actually this hole right here. I'm going to go from 1F to 1E. But I can fit this thing up down here at row 17, from 17E to 17F. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pliers and I'm going to grab it right about where I think the hole, where the bend's going to be. I'm going to get it flush. I'm going to grab it right about there. Ah, come on. Make sure it's solid, and then I'm going to bend it. Yes, I know I've got an extra lot of wire here. That's fine. This was residue wire from all the different components I've soldered in. So it was trash to begin with. So I got myself a nice little U shape, and I'm going to stick it in the board. Might need a little finagling. Hi. I am. And that is it put in. And now I've got to figure out how I'm going to solder flush that. So turn it upside down. I've got some pressure on it, on the board, pushing down on that. I'm going to do one side. I'm going to use this big wire to my advantage. A sponge. Apply some heat. And just like I did earlier, get some heat and get some solder on there. Oh. Grab it, give it a nice little yank, and you can see it's pretty much flush to the board. And once it's flush, or flush enough, I'm just going to come back on this side and finish it off. Yeah, it does not want, it wants to rock. That's the problem that you come in with doing soldering. As you get farther along, it's going to want to rock and roll around a little bit. That's where things like helping hands, little alligator stands and stuff really help out, is that it keeps these things stable. Also having blocks to set things up on. So I'm using my diagonal cutters in some aspects. You can use pencils, anything that really doesn't conduct heat. I'm going to cut that back. And so there's that. I'm going to do the same thing as I did earlier. Take a wire, take it back down to there. Grab about where I think it's going to bend. Of course. All right. Grab right there. Bend it. I have my U-ish, kind of more of a J-hook, whatever. Make sure I got my fit right. So you can see this is a little pushed, so I'm going to take it out, unbend it. And since I know exactly where it bent, I'm going to grab a little further deep end, give it a bend. This one's going to look a little bit uglier. And just putting in there, and that's going to work. And so this is going to be the second one in. In hindsight, it'd probably be easier to have soldered the second one in first. Oop. So just drop it in like that. Get some solder. grab my pliers, grab a weight, look at it. It's got a little elevation to it, but nothing's going to hurt it. Get some solder on the back side. Let's see if I can pull a little through on this one. Yeah. A little elevation on it, but that's fine. And there's my jumpers. Now, what else do I have to do? Alright, so I need to run 1 and ground, or 1 and C1 back up to the ground. So that is going to be row 2 on this thing. Alright, so pin 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take me some wire. That's some wire. I'm going to strip it. I'm going to strip it back. This is 20 gauge wire. Maybe it's 22. Strip it back about 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to put a bend in it. So that's what it's going to look like right there. Okay? Now, I've got to run from row 2 right here down to this pin right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and push this wire in right here and sink it down below so just fortunately that it fits right underneath the LED, almost like I planned it. I didn't plan it. And now I need to figure out, as you can see, I've got a lot of wire right here. I need to figure out where on this wire I need to cut. Now, what you'll find out is these are 2.54 millimeters wide. And so what I want to do is I want to measure about 2 spots away from where I need to cut. 1, 2. And I'm going to cut right here about 2.5. So I'm going to take my diagonal cutters. I want this hole. 1, 2, and I'm going to cut right about there. It's almost at the third hole. And I'm going to take the wire out. I'm going to strip the other half about 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to bend it so that it makes that 90 degree. And now, if I did this right, I can just slip it in like that, slip it in that hole right there, give it a little wiggle, get it under there, and there it is. And now I don't have an extra jumper for the jumper wire bin. And you just flip it over, give it a little solder. Now, what you'll notice is that wire came way up. So what I should have soldered this side, but it wouldn't have mattered much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat this wire back up. I'm going to heat it like this. You need to be careful because this could get hot. Get it hot and just push it through. Probably would be better if you used a stick or a pair of tweezers, but if you're fast, you can do it with your finger. And I was holding it over here, as far away from the solder point as I could, not on top of it. So I'm going to come in here and put a little bit more solder in it, because I didn't like how it's bold on the bottom. Grab it with the pliers and let go. And I'm going to come back in and do this wire. There we go. Trim this off. And so that is ground to 1. Now I have 2 options at this point. I can either come on this row right here and go straight up to this point right here, or I can take this row right here, bend around and come up to here. Because 1 ties into the capacitor, which ties into that pin. I've already tied 1 into row 2, so I can either just take the capacitor straight to here, or I could take the capacitor to there. So what's going to be the easiest way to do this? The easiest way to do this is probably going to be to run a wire between here and here. And if you notice, that row right there is tied in with that pin. However, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to strip, once again, about 1/4 inch of material, and I'm going to stick it in this hole. The reason why I'm not doing this is not because I really hate myself. I really don't. Is I'm going to show you how you make 90 degrees. Of course, I don't have a screwdriver. I got something. Alright, so I'm going to stick it in this hole right here. Right? I'm going to come off that hole. Now I need to make a 90-degree turn right here to come up here and end right there. Okay? So what I'm going to do is, if I had a screwdriver, oh, there it is. I'd use the screwdriver, but I've got this. I'm going to take this stick, stick it in the hole, and then bend my 90 degrees around that pivot, like such. And I'm going to keep bending till I have 90 degrees. Like such. And you'll see I probably went too far. Yep, I went too far. So, but since I have an idea of where I need to be, I can kind of massage my wire into place. And that is going to work. Now the next problem is I've got to figure out how I'm going to make this cut, because I obviously can't cut in here using that 3 rule. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another part of the board I'm not using. You can also do this with just another proto board that you might have laying around. So you can see I come to this row, and then I'm going to come up 1, 2, 3, 4 holes. So if I turn the board 90 degrees and I just stick it in this hole, let's stick it in this hole right here. So I just need an example. Well, let's stick it in this hole right there. I need to come up, you can see I've got it laid perfect. I need to come up 4 holes. Make sure. This is the hole that I need to go to. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, okay, that's not going to work. Let's come down one more. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and then a little extra. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut it right here on the edge of the board. And then I'm going to strip it. And strip it, bend it, and hope that it fits. So I'm going to stick it in. As you can see, it's a little bit heavy, so I have a little bit extra material. If I really wanted to clean this up, I'd come back up here, strip a little more out, but I'm not actually interested in fixing too much of this because I could actually just massage it. I'm just going to solder that into place. And that's what happens. So one of the other things you can do I want that. I want that. So I'm running into a problem where that wire does not want to stay in the board. How can I tie that into the board? I know. I take one of these pieces of wire, give it a nice U-bend, stick it through the proto board. Now this has got some tension on it, but I could take this and actually just like bend it down. So I'm just bending those wires down and it's holding it in place. And now that it's in place, with comfort, I can come in, and if I can find my pins, so right there, get some heat. Okay, like that. And this one right here. Apply some heat. Now, I'm not going to cut my little holder because it was just a temporary holder. I'm just going to yank it out of the board. And you can see it's not perfect, but I can work with that. I'm going to take the solder, get some heat, push it down, even. Grab it with the pliers, apply some upward tension. There we go. Now it's nice and flush to the board. That one's pretty good anyways. And I'm going to cut that flush. Cut this one flush. And that should be the board. Looking over my circuit, did I run 2 to 6? No, I did not run 2 to 6. So, another cool trick. So, if you can play it, I can either come right here, like I just did with this wide wire, come to 2, run around, and then run up to 6. But I've got all this extra space here. So I know this pin right here is 2, this pin right here is 6, right? 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to do something. So this pin, as it flips over, comes towards this end. This is 2 right here, and this is 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 6. So I'm going to put my pliers down, and all that little spare wire I've been playing around with, I can actually jumper on the back side. Now, I'll say this. It's going to be, got to be very cautious with this because you're trying to go pin to pin. So I want to cut this down. So right about here. So this is the piece I want. That's 2 to 6, right? All right. Now this is going to be the fun part. This is why it also might be easier just to do the wire. All right. So pin 2 is this pin right here. All right. Now this wire is just sitting here floating. So I'm going to get some heat back into it. All right. That's good for now. So just to make sure, pin 2 to pin 6. It's not wanting to jump. So what I'm trying to do now is make a solder bridge. It's not making a solder bridge. So in this particular case, it's not going to work. I cut the wire too short. But that's an idea you can do. So for this situation, I'm going to abandon that idea. I'm going to take some wire and I'm going to do the bend I was previously trying not to do. So 2 to 6. This is 6. And I'm going to bend right here. Give it a 90-degree bend. Put it back in 6. I'm an idiot. That's not 6. 6 is 1 up. So I'm going to take the kink back out. Grab the wire right there. Give it a bend. Give it a bend that way. We're going to 2, so I'm going to cut 1, 2, right about there. Pop it. Get about a 1/4 inch strip, 1/4 inch. So I'm looking at this. I don't like this side. I like this side better. So I'm just going to pop it back out, bend this wire straight, like that, strip about 1/8 of an inch, bend it again. I'm not too worried about if it gets really long. I can fix that just by snipping it off. What I can't fix is if it's too short. And that is much better. Okay. Take some of that wire from previous. Stick it in the hole. Didn't get a full bend on it. Stick it down in there, get it in. There we go. It's got some nice tightness to it. And now that. Get some heat here. Get some elevation. That is way too much solder. but that's because I've now soldered into 3 different components and messed up once, and tried to solder another, I guess really messed up twice. So there's that. And take this out rather than take it out. And I'm going to cut this short. There's that. There's that. And that should be the board. I hope this helps.